You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
I'm really looking forward today on our Total Wellness Tuesday show to really following up on our discussion from last Tuesday of, do you have these symptoms of leaky gut? And if you didn't listen to that show, I highly recommend you listen to that now. So it's episode 508. Literally just go to stephencabral.com/podcasts, and you can just scroll back to 508 or go to stephencabral.com/508. You can always go to that day's direct podcast show by entering in the show number right after stephencabral.com. The reason why that's so important is it was one of our most popular shows. And of course, the reason is that the symptoms of leaky gut, it goes way beyond and well beyond bloating and gas and intestinal discomfort, IBS, Crohn's, colitis, well beyond that, really. It really ventures into inflammation in general, poor immunity, autoimmune disorders, joint pain, skin issues, headaches. Really, you have to check that show out because they go in depth on what's not being talked about. Yes, it's starting to be talked about, but really it'll be years before it becomes mainstream. So I want to bring it to you right here on the Cabral Concept. And today on part 2, we're going to talk about what to do to actually repair leaky gut. Okay, so you have the symptoms of leaky gut, or you just want to improve your gut health because you understand, you know, that 80% of your entire immune system lies outside of your gut wall. And if 80% of your immune system is right outside of your gut wall, well, we want to make sure that we're really doing our best to keep that area as healthy and fortified as possible. And the reason is that as so your gut health goes the rest of your health. I can guarantee you that. If you have poor gut health, you're literally going to be leaking in proteins, yeast, bacteria, infection, all sorts of different microbes, pathogens, things like that you don't want in your bloodstream. And I mentioned that last week on Tuesday. And the reason is this. Your gut, so it's about 28 feet of digestive tract from the esophagus to the stomach to the small intestine, large intestine, and then out of your body. Well, that's actually supposed to be a tube that's running like the outside of your body through your body. So think of it this way. It's almost like plumbing. You don't want the plumbing to be able to leak through the pipe. Because if it does, you're going to get all that sewage and nasty stuff that you don't want into your bloodstream. Now, the only thing that's supposed to get into that bloodstream are the amino acids from the proteins, your sugars from your carbs, and your fatty acids, essentially, small fatty acid chains from your fats, from your healthy fats. That's what you want to get in there. You don't want the bacteria. You don't want the yeast. You don't want all the other things that could get into your bloodstream to get into your bloodstream. So really, really important. All right. So definitely check out that show. Now, today, let's get right into it. In functional medicine, this has been taught now for over a decade. So after I did my doctoral degree in naturopathy, after that, you're basically allowed to specialize in something. So what I did was I specialized in Ayurvedic medicine. Of course, I studied traditional Chinese medicine. I studied Taoist. I studied homeopathy. I studied all of these things. But what I settled in on was a deep understanding of Ayurvedic medicine, which is the most prolific form of medicine in the world. It really is. It's the most in-depth. And then I took that and I said, okay, this is also like ancient Ayurvedic. What I did was I blended that with state-of-the-art functional medicine, the most high-tech of the high-tech lab testing. I mean, really, your body's like a chemistry set, and I can find out exactly what's going on with your body if I'm able to do some functional medicine lab tests with you. And I do that a lot. But what I found was this: when I studied, so I did my postdoctoral work all over the world, but in the United States and in the Netherlands and Europe as well, I did functional medicine training. And in that, they have a 4R process, okay? This is the way that you heal the gut. Now, I do it very specifically because I blend things, and I'm going to teach you that today. I'm going to teach you exactly what I do and what I learned from Ayurvedic medicine as well. Plus, doing other postdoctoral work. Like I studied directly under Dr. Natasha McBride for the GAP-based protocol and all of these different things. And again, there's no one for everyone, but what I found was this is the way that you heal leaky gut. And for the first time ever, I'm going to share that with you here today. So the first thing you do, the first R out of your 4 R's is remove. There is no way that you should be, and I'm going to be getting into this, there's no way you should keep adding more supplements, adding more probiotics, adding all this stuff until you remove a few different things. Let's go over those now. You have to remove the H. pylori, the Helicobacter pylori. And the reason why that's so important is it lives in your stomach essentially, and it eats stomach acid. I know that's a crude analogy for all the health practitioners out there, but that's essentially what it does. It eats 1/2 of hydrochloric acid. That's what it's able to be fed on. It's also a bacteria, it's a pathogen. It causes other issues as well, such as ulcers. But really what I'm looking at is this. If it shuts down stomach acid, guess what else happens? Really poor absorption of your vitamins and minerals, especially calcium, magnesium, zinc. It can't break down your proteins because you don't have enough stomach acid. So a lot of people just stop eating protein in general because they get bloated from it. And it allows for fermentation in your stomach. So a really slow transit time. What does that do? Well, then it allows for fermentation of bacteria. And that bacteria can then grow in your gut. And that also causes bacterial-based issues as well that can move from your stomach right into your small intestine, causing things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So we remove the H. pylori. We need to remove yeast. We need to remove parasites from the gut, and we need to remove bacteria. All right. So what about that? Like, how do we go about that? Because that's obviously a tall order. Well, the first thing is, we don't necessarily know if you have H. pylori, right? So we could do a stool-based test, and with a stool test, we can test for H. pylori and we can test for parasites. Okay, so if you don't have those, like let's just say you don't have the nausea when you eat, you don't have the heartburn, you probably don't have H. pylori. You might, but you probably don't. And if you don't have loose stool pretty much every day, if you don't have the back acne, the forehead acne, if your symptoms don't get worse just at night, then you might not have a parasite, okay? For the most part, let's say 8 to 9 out of 10 people, what they're going to have is some type of gut dysbiosis. They're going to have an overgrowth of bacteria in their small intestine, as well as imbalance of bacteria. So they have more of we'll call it just the bad bacteria today than good bacteria. So that good bacteria has kind of lost its foothold. And that means then you're not able now to manufacture the B vitamins, the vitamin K, the serotonin, which is that feel-good neurotransmitter that also then leads itself and lends itself to producing more melatonin at night for sleep. That's why really any health issue you're dealing with right now, you have to start with the gut. It's just the bottom line. There's no other way around it. Obviously, there's no stock to buy in gut health. It is what it is. I'm just teaching you that this is the place to start. It honestly is. Okay. So what happens though is that when you do eventually end up with bacterial overgrowth, people do antibiotics or they do whatever it might be, okay? And I talked about that in the symptoms of how these things get started on last week's show, number 508. But what happens is we might use these anti-bacterial such as antibiotics, which is anti-life, and it kills the bacteria, the bad and the good. But what happens is it doesn't kill the yeast. It's not an antifungal, and the yeast starts to overgrow. So now we have a secondary infection from candida or yeast-based overgrowth. So here's what we need to do. In this order, exactly this order. First, we wipe out the H. pylori. All right. Second, we wipe out the parasites. Third, we wipe out the bacterial overgrowth. And then fourth, we take out the yeast. So I'm going to teach you exactly what I do in my protocol because I make this a lot easier. And again, if you don't have H. pylori and you don't have parasites, there's no need to do those steps. You can just skip those steps and you can do the candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol, which I'm going to spend the most time on because honestly, that's all people need. That's for the most part, that's all people need unless they know they have one of those particular infections. Okay. So that's the removal phase. All right. That's part one. That's the first R. The second R is replace. Okay. So this means replace. This is typically you must replace the foods in your diet that are allowing the growth of these bacteria, these parasites, particularly bacteria though, and yeast. So what is that? Well, these foods predominantly live on certain types of carbohydrates. All right. They're the fructo, oligo, di, mono, and polysaccharides. And you might be saying, what does that mean? They're just certain chains, sugar-based chains, carb-based chains. And it allows then for those particular carbohydrates to move down the small intestine, not quite totally digested. And then allows those bacteria as well as yeast to ferment them, to actually create with a lactic acid-based fermentation process. So think of it as like your body has both an aerobic and anaerobic threshold to create energy. Well, these bacteria produce a lot of lactic acid. They're lactobacilli, so like the small intestine is lactobacilli, and there can be an overgrowth of that, but there can be also bifidobacterium that ended up in the large intestine. We'll get to that as well. And then there is the yeast, and the yeast will give off a lot of those same acid-based waste products. So we have to remove those. But here's the thing. People come to me and when they see my nutrition plan and they can't believe that they can eat different vegetables, they can't believe they can eat fruit, and they can't believe they can eat certain starches they say, this can't be right because I've always been told I need to eliminate all carbs on a candida diet. And I say, yes, that's old school thinking. Practitioners who are still doing that are trying to do their best to help you, but they don't realize that if you find out which carbohydrates contain more glucose molecules than fructose molecules, and you eat those in a certain pattern, which is essentially before your heavier proteins or things like that, it allows for the transportation of those fructans, those fructose molecules, to be directly shuttled through your stomach and first part of your small intestine by glucose molecules before they ever reach the yeast or the bacteria. And that's why people love the plan that we put them on, and that's because they still get to eat about 2 dozen fruit, 3 dozen different vegetables, and about a half dozen to 9 or so different starches. And so they don't have to worry about just completely eliminating one entire food group. It's completely unnecessary to do that. It really is. This is what we specialize in. I mean, 60% of all the people who come to us, or just maybe above that, is digestive health. And keep in mind, 100% of the people who come to us work on gut health. So 60% have really bad issues with Crohn's, colitis, IBS, candida, SIBO, all of those issues, H. pylori, parasites, and we help them out every single time. That this is very, very scientific. We know how to do this. Do functional medicine doctors, do researchers know everything about the gut microbiome? Absolutely not. No way. No way will I ever tell you that. That is the frontier, right? There's genetic engineering, genetic editing, and then there's the microbiome. That is the future of medicine. That honestly, that is the future, but we still know a lot right now, and certainly enough to help anybody with gut-based issues. Okay. So we eliminate those particular foods and we stick to our proteins, our carbs, and our fats. But also just do keep in mind, just because like a lot of people are cutting out carbs doesn't mean you can overload with protein. And the reason is this. If you don't have the stomach acid or that protein starts to putrefy, that creates bacteria as well. And the other thing is you can't overload on fats with these like 80% fat diets, which is just totally inappropriate for the human body, is because your liver and your gallbladder still have to work to produce and then reuptake massive amounts of bile that breaks down fat. Just because you put in tons of fat into your body doesn't mean your body can process that, or it certainly doesn't mean it can process it very well. So always think in mind, like we can't just do things to our body and expect our body to just say, okay, I'll deal with that. Like that's not how the body works. The body has to be equipped to be able to handle all of these particular things. All right. Number 3 is repair. So we repair with specific supplements. So what are the specific supplements that we do? Well, here's what we do. If you have the H. pylori infection or overgrowth, then what we do is we use a product with berberine, with mastica gum, with zinc, and a few others. And our product is called Healthy Belly. It's easily the best product out there because it combines all of those. Instead of taking 3 different supplements, you want the best. You want it to be simple. Like that's easy. So you take one upon waking and one before bed. And you do that for anywhere from 30 days to 90 days. I just like 90-day. I mean, it's better. And the reason why it's better is that you assure yourself that it's gone. You know, like it might be gone in 30 days. You could retest, which costs a couple $100, or you could just take this product, which is like $30. So it's obviously it's much, much less expensive. And then you can start with the parasite protocol. Now, you can do that just to rest assured, okay, I'm doing the Healthy Belly and I'm doing the parasite protocol. Great. The parasite protocol contains things like wormwood, black walnut, cloves. Like all of those have always been known. Like whether you live in the Amazon, whether you're living in India, whether you're in China, all of these independent medical systems, which again, I've studied them all use the same products. Now they add other things to that, but they all use these products. And the other thing they do is they use biofilm disruptors. We do the same exact thing. It's a newer thing without a doubt. Again, what's a biofilm disruptor? Basically, these parasites and bacteria, they create a film over themselves. And that film is kind of like a roof to the house. And if you have a roof over the house, you can't really access the gut bug that you want to get rid of. So these biofilm disruptors, again, you don't feel any of this. They just go in, they use certain proteases, which is enzymes, and they just dissolve the biofilm. And then once the biofilm's dissolved, you can actually access these parasites and bacterial overgrowth and yeast and all that. So, okay, once you've done those first two things, again, not everyone's going to need to do that. For the most part, people can just jump right to this specific step. Okay, this next step is the Candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol. Again, I've never revealed this before. This is exactly what we do in my practice. I've had hundreds of health practitioners ask me, how exactly do you do this? Why do you do it this way? So here's what we do. Doctors and health practitioners have made the mistake for too long about giving probiotics to people with gut dysbiosis or SIBO. Okay, that's the wrong thing to do. And I'm going to tell you why right now. The reason is this. If you already have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that's what SIBO stands for, or gut dysbiosis, you are adding more fuel to the fire. Legitimately, like you have overgrowth. So now you're adding in more probiotics, which creates what? More bacteria, more overgrowth. Can it work out for some people? Yes, only if the dysbiosis, meaning the imbalance, is very small. If it's a large dysbiosis, then it's going to be really inappropriate. So, but why even bother? So here's what we do. We use a specific blend of a biofilm disruptor. I'm going to tell you exactly how it works right now. Use a biofilm disruptor, which removes the layer over the bacterial overgrowth, over the yeast candida, and maybe even over the parasites, which we're going to wipe out as well. And then what we use is a specific herbal formula. And we use that herbal formula, and the herbal formula works phenomenally well because what we do each month is we use the biofilm disruptor and the herbal formula. Each month, we change the herbs that are used. And the reason is this. You can actually do a stool culture, like you can send in your stool to a lab and find out if oregano is going to work best for you to kill bacterial overgrowth or yeast overgrowth. Uva ursi, you can see if maybe caprylic acid's going to, you can see if unsalicylic acid, you can see all these different things, like if they're going to work. Here's what we do. Forget about spending the $500 to culture your stool like that. Let's give you a protocol that contains all of them. And with each month, they get progressively stronger. Why do I do that? And that's because I've been doing this a long time. I had to do it with myself many years ago. That's why I figured all this out. I had the worst, like an awful case of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Awful. And one of the worst cases of yeast and candida overgrowth. I had such a huge case of candida overgrowth that it grew all the way up from my intestines into my stomach and up my esophagus into my mouth. And I know this because I had an endoscopy done and the GI doctor couldn't believe I had yeast in my esophagus growing all the way up. And so I had to be on a very strong protocol. And that's how I discovered all of these things. And I did it naturally. And the reason why I did it naturally is I took the drugs, I took the antibiotics, I took the antifungals, and it grew back. That's the problem. People are taking the drugs, they're taking the SIBO drugs, and they're relapsing. It will never fix itself until you do this last step to the process. Okay, the last step to the process is not throwing in probiotics willy-nilly. Everybody's thinking about probiotics and all these different things. And I think it's great because their mind's in the right place. You need to do that. But here's what we do. We start with a single strain probiotic, just the small intestinal strain, the lactobacilli-based strain. And we make sure it's dairy-free. We make sure it's low histamines. We make sure that people can do that to start to what? Repopulate the small intestine. Why? Because you are swallowing the probiotic. And remember, when you swallow it, guess where it goes first? The small intestine. So too many people are using large intestine, so the colon, probiotics, and they're swallowing them through their mouth. And when they swallow them, they're putting large intestine bacteria in their small intestine. That's how you create SIBO in the first place. That's one of the ways, is a backup through the ileocecal valve that I spoke about on episode 508. And when that happens, you make your own SIBO. It's not even from the environment. It's not from food. You just have a backup in your system. It's literally like your garbage disposal just kind of gurgles up into the sink. It's disgusting, but that's exactly what can happen in your own body. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So what I do is I repopulate small intestine first, and then I add in 5 more strains. And then I add in 10 total. So now I'm repopulating the gut. And then, yes, I'm adding in then the colon-based strains, but only when? Only when the small intestine has enough of the lactobacilli-based strains that have a foothold now that will not then allow for the transient large intestinal-based strains called bifidobacterium-based strains to actually get stuck. And it works so well. This is why I'm just kind of teaching this today. And even if you're not a health practitioner, you want to know why this works so that you can understand when you're reading things online, you say, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense because look, it's doing this, this, and this. So that was the third R, which is the repair. And then the last part is this, the rebalancing. The rebalancing is what I just got into. It's the probiotics, it's the full strain probiotics, dairy-free, of course, okay, because you don't want to be feeding. And then it's also, this is when bone broth is appropriate, okay? If you're vegan, you never need to use bone broth to get great results. Never. Like I don't use bone broth in my practice. But if people want to do bone broth, I say, sure, it can work great. No problem at all. Absolutely. Feel free to use it, okay? Aloe can work great for a lot of people, not for everyone. Zinc and glutamine, though, like really, that's what it's about. I always use the 80-20 rule in life and in my business. And the 80-20 rule is this. 20% of what you do is going to give you 80% of all the results that you get in life. And that goes for everything. Meaning like there's a critical few things that you do that are going to make the biggest impact in your life. Bone broth takes a while to cook. It takes timing, all these things. You get a supplement that just gives you zinc and glutamine, L-glutamine. That's it. Like that is what's shown. Those two things will repair your gut wall. They literally will patch up and bring together the lamina propria. So you do the 12-week candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol, and then you do another 30 days to ideally 90 days. I mean, I just would do it 90 days of the just one putter. And how do you do this? Like, this is how easy it is. So honestly, because it's all about action and it's about consistency and it's about ease of use. Because your whole life is not about taking nutritional supplements. Like my life is about studying them and implementing them, but that's not your life. And your life with taking nutritional supplements, here's what I want you to do. You wake up in the morning and you make a smoothie. And if you want to chew food, great. Make some oatmeal, make something else with it. That's totally fine. But you have to do it. You should do a smoothie. You really should. And I'll tell you why. It's so easy just to use the daily nutritional support powder or your favorite, whatever one. You can use whatever you want. Feel free. But make sure it doesn't have prebiotics. Make sure it doesn't have inulin in it. Make sure it doesn't have maltodextrin and all the other stuff that you don't want, which can create gut dysbiosis again. No sugar alcohols, none of that stuff, okay? So get a good all-in-one powder. Of course, I recommend the daily nutritional support powder. I've manufactured it, formulated it for a reason to be very, very healthy for the gut. It's dairy-free, soy-free, gluten-free. It's everything free, egg-free, nut-free. It is a vegan powder. And then you just add 1 scoop of the powder, the healthy gut support powder. That's it. So it's a gut rebuilding protocol, but the healthy gut powder, you just add that with your other powder. Then you add in your fruit. You can add in some spinach like I do. You can add in your water. You can put in a little tablespoon of coconut cream or coconut oil. And it's absolutely delicious. And it gives you everything you need. You don't need to do anything for the rest of the day. And then you swallow a probiotic with that. That's it. You don't need to do anything the rest of the day, and your gut's repairing itself, whether you do the bone broth, whether you do the aloe, whether you add a little bit of fermented foods with your meals, all of those things can work. I'm not saying they can't. I totally believe in them. I mean, believe me, when I lived in India, when I lived in Sri Lanka, we did all of those things. Okay, they're not big on bone broth over there. They will do some, but they're not big on that. It's more of the fermented food and the kefir and different things like that, the quark. But what I found is it's not tolerated by everyone because some people with histamines, like they drive them bananas. I couldn't do fermented food or a lot of those things for at least a decade because it would drive my histamine levels crazy. So again, it's not an all for one. It just doesn't work for some people. That's all. But by doing a little bit of zinc, by doing a little bit of glutamine, and the healthy gut support powder even has the aloe vera in it. Like it's just super easy. But again, I gave you exactly what the supplements are. I told you what are in them, meaning like for the H. pylori, it's berberine, it's zinc, it's masticagum. You want to use a biofilm disruptor with proteases in it. For the healthy gut support, how do you rebuild your gut wall? Well, again, you should use the daily nutritional support powder or, again, a comparable powder because you just want one with B vitamins. You want it with a good hypoallergenic protein powder. Like you want all the amino acids. You want that. So that's easy. You'll get that. You'll find that wherever you'd like. And then the healthy gut support powder. What's in it? If you don't want to use the one that I formulate, find one with zinc. Find one with glutamine. And then if you can, find one with a little bit of aloe vera in there as well. Like that is what's going to repair your gut. Now, how long is this whole thing? 3 months, add in the healthy gut support powder after that. That's just basically maintenance. So what I recommend ongoing is something like the Dr. Ball Daily Protocol. And that's me talking to the third person right now. What I do every day is I use the Daily Nutritional Support Butter. That's all of your multivitamin, minerals, antioxidants, and 15 grams of hypoallergenic powder that you just mix in a smoothie. Do it mid-afternoon if you want. If you don't want to do it for breakfast, that's fine. Do it post-workout if you want. But then for the daily protocol, then I take the Daily Probiotic Support, which is a dairy-free, low histamine probiotic. And again, I'm histamine sensitive as well, so it's a great product. Again, I formulated for sensitive gut people. That's what's going to keep your gut balanced going forward. And then with that is the Daily Fruit and Vegetable Blend. So now it's 22 organic fruits and vegetables. Why do I love this protocol so much? Why have I settled in on that? It's the best of whole food nutrition with a gluten-free, dairy-free, 22 fruits and vegetables, all organic, no added fillers, no inulin, no maltodextrins, nothing like that. And it's the best of functional medicine with the Daily Nutritional Support Powder with 50 billion live bacteria that have been third-party tested and also dairy-free that I put in my body. That's it. Going forward, like that's what I do. Now, do I use other products as well? Yes. I mix in other nutritional supplements all the time. I'm always experimenting. I'm on a great protocol right now. I'm practicing. I'm really tweaking just some different anti-aging and mitochondrial based protocols right now, but you don't need to do any of that. Like you can do what I would say is that's your basis. And then you add in, a B vitamin, some magnesium, whatever you need after that point to keep you going. That's where you customize it. But for most humans, that's typically what I recommend. And so hopefully today's show is helpful. It really outlines exactly what I do from a functional medicine, but blended with an Ayurvedic perspective, a naturopathic, old school naturopathy perspective. And of course, if there's questions on this, I'm here to answer your questions. Just go to stephencabral.com/ask Cabral. And of course, on the weekends, that's where we do our Cabral house calls, where I answer those questions on those shows. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. Remember, if you didn't tune into episode 508, you have to check that out. That's the symptoms that you never think about of leaky gut. And I really do appreciate you tuning in. If you're able to, please feel free to share this show with anyone that it could help. Take care. Before you go, I wanted to share a personal story with you. The real reason I began to get well finally is because I figured out what was wrong with me. And that might seem pretty obvious, but I went from doctor to doctor for over 2 years before discovering at-home functional medicine lab testing. These are the labs that enabled me to finally figure out what was wrong with my hormones, blood sugar, electrolytes, and gut health. And once I knew what was wrong, I could then follow a proven plan in order to rebalance my body from the inside out. This is why I believe so strongly in functional medicine lab testing and why I've made it my mission to share these labs with the world. Now at equa.life, you can order an at-home lab test or lab bundle for you and your family and be able to complete it within the week. Plus, the EquaLife difference is that you're not left to try to read and figure out these labs on your own. We explain what your lab numbers mean, what they mean in the much bigger picture, and then how to go about rebalancing your body in order to heal. To see our full selection of lab tests or to set up a free lab selection call to find out what labs may be best for you, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. And do remember, we ship these all over the world. To find out more and to set up your free lab selection call, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. That's EQUI.LIFE/labs.